You find yourself standing quietly inside an old map room, a place where time feels slower, heavier, and far less demanding than anywhere else, as though the world beyond these stone walls has gently agreed to wait. A large wooden table rests at the center of the room, its surface worn smooth by countless years of careful use, and spread across it are wide, yellowed maps, their edges curled softly, their ink faded, but still full of meaning. Candlelight moves gently across the paper, revealing winding rivers, uneven coastlines, distant mountain ranges, and names written in an elegant hand, names that no longer call anyone to travel, but instead invite you to remain still. The air is calm and cool, carrying the faint scent of old paper, melted wax, and stone that has held the same quiet for centuries. And somewhere nearby, rain touched the window with a steady, patient rhythm. You do not need to move closer to the table, and you do not need to step back either, because everything in this room feels perfectly placed, as though it has been arranged not for activity, but for rest. The candle burns steadily, its flames small and reliable, casting long shadows that stretch and soften along the walls, moving just enough to remind you that nothing here is completely still, and yet nothing is in any hurry. As you look across the maps, you begin to notice how the lines and markings no longer feel like directions, but like gentle suggestions, quiet reminders of places that exist whether they are ever reached or not. Some roads end suddenly, some rivers disappear beneath inked symbols, and some lands are left intentionally blank, offering no answers, no instructions, and no expectations at all. There is comfort in that emptiness. The rain outside continues, tapping softly against the glass, each drop arriving without urgency, without intention, simply falling, and then allowing the next moment to arrive in its place. Time feels different here, as though it has loosened its grip, no longer counting minutes or measuring progress, but simply resting alongside you, content to remain undefined. You might notice your breathing slowing slightly now, lengthening on its own, without effort, without guidance, as the quiet rhythm of the room begins to replace whatever pace you carried with you before entering. Nothing in this space asks for your attention, and nothing requires a response, because this room was never meant for decision or movement, only for quiet observation and gentle thought. The maps remain where they are. The candle continues to glow, and the rain keeps falling outside, all of it existing together in a calm balance that does not need to be understood. And as you remain here, surrounded by paper, stone, and soft light, it becomes easier to simply stay, allowing the room to hold its silence and allowing yourself to rest within it. You begin to notice how the room seems to respond to stillness rather than movement, as though every object here has learned over long and patient years that the most important moments are the ones where nothing at all is required. The maps on the table lie open and undisturbed, their surfaces marked with careful lines and faded symbols that once suggested distance and direction, but now feel more like quiet memories than invitations to go anywhere. Some of the ink has softened with time, blurring slightly at the edges, and this gentle loss of clarity feels reassuring, as if the maps themselves have chosen to let go of precision, choosing instead to remain calm and incomplete. The candle continues to burn beside them, its light warm and steady, illuminating the paper just enough to reveal texture rather than detail, allowing shapes to exist without demanding attention, and allowing your gaze to rest without effort. You might notice that the longer you remain here, the less important it feels to understand what any of these markings once meant, because the room does not expect comprehension, only presence. The rain outside maintains this quiet rhythm, falling against the window in soft, repeating patterns that never ask to be counted, each drop arriving, lingering for a brief moment, and then disappearing without consequence. That sound blends gently with the silence of the room, creating a background that feels continuous and predictable, something that can be noticed or ignored entirely without changing the experience. Time continues to soften, stretching gently, no longer separating moments into before and after, but allowing everything to exist together, as though past and present have agreed to rest side by side. You may feel a subtle sense of weight settling comfortably, not pressing down, but grounding you, reminding you that there's no need to remain alert, no need to anticipate what comes next. The room remains unchanged, holding its balance effortlessly, the candle still glowing, the maps still open, the rain still falling, and nothing here suggests that anything new is about to happen. This quiet consistency begins to feel deeply reassuring, offering the sense of safety that does not rely on explanation, only on repetition. Breathing becomes slower, deeper, and easier to forget, each breath arriving naturally, staying just long enough, and then leaving again, making space without effort or awareness. There is no need to follow the breath, and no reason to guide it, because the body already understands the pace of this place. The old map room was never meant for urgency, and it carries no expectation of movement or decision, only the gentle permission to remain, to rest, and to allow the quiet to continue doing its work. And as you stay here a little longer, surrounded by candlelight, rain, and paper that no longer demands meaning, it becomes easier to release whatever tension remains, letting the room hold it for you, and letting yourself sink further into stillness. You become gradually aware that the longer you remain within the quiet boundaries of the map room, the more the space itself seems to soften around you, as though the walls, the table, and even the air have begun to recognize that there is no need for sharp edges or clear definitions here. The maps continue to rest across the wooden surface, their wide sheets overlapping slightly, forming layers of paper and ink that suggest distance without requiring it, direction without urgency, and possibility without obligation, allowing your eyes to move slowly across them without settling on any one place for very long. Some coastlines curve gently along the edges of the parchment, fading into the margins, while rivers wander inward, branching and narrowing until they disappear entirely, leaving behind only the suggestion that they once flowed somewhere beyond the limits of the page. This absence of completion feels intentional, as though the maps were never meant to be finished, but instead designed to hold space for rest, for pause, for the quiet recognition that not every path needs to be followed. The candle beside the table continues to glow steadily, its flame untroubled by drafts or movement, casting a warm, amber light that drifts slowly across the maps, revealing texture more than detail, depth more than meaning, and allowing your gaze to relax rather than focus. Shadows stretch and retreat along the stone walls in a slow, predictable pattern, moving just enough to remind you that time still exists here, but not enough to demand that you pay attention to it or measure it in any meaningful way. Outside the window, the rain persists in its gentle rhythm, falling without variation or emphasis, each drop joining the next in a steady sequence that feels endless and unbroken, a sound that no longer signals weather or distance, but simply continuity. That sound blends seamlessly with the quiet of the room, forming a background that feels complete on its own, a layer of calm that supports stillness rather than interrupting it, and allows thoughts to slow naturally without resistance. As moments pass, it becomes less important to remain aware of where you are standing or how long you have been here, because the room offers no cues that suggest change, only the reassurance that nothing will be required of you. Breathing deepens almost without notice, lengthening gently, each breath arriving softly, lingering briefly, and then dissolving into the next, forming a rhythm that mirrors the quiet patterns around you. There is no need to follow that rhythm and no reason to guide it because it belongs entirely to the body now, moving at a pace that feels deeply compatible with the stillness of the space. The old map room continues to hold its balance effortlessly, the maps remaining open, the candle continuing to burn, the rain falling outside, all of it existing together in a calm, repeating arrangement that does not change and does not need to. And as you remain here, surrounded by paper that no longer asks to be read, by light that does not insist on being seen, and by sound that does not require attention, it becomes easier to let awareness loosen slightly, to rest more deeply, and to allow the room to continue quietly on its own. You begin to sense that the old map room does not exist to tell stories of travel or discovery, but rather to quietly collect moments of stillness, holding them gently between stone walls that have learned over centuries how to remain calm without effort. The maps spread across the table no longer suggest places to reach, but instead feel like careful records of patience, their lines softened by time, the edges worn not by haste, but by long periods of quiet attention and rest. Some markings appear almost hesitant now, as though the hand that once drew them paused often, considering each line carefully, never rushing to complete what did not need to be finished, allowing empty spaces to remain where certainty was unnecessary. The candle beside the maps continues to glow with a steady, unchanging flame, its light warm but restrained, illuminating only what lies close, leaving the rest of the room comfortably undefined, as though clarity itself has learned when to step aside. Shadows move slowly along the stone walls, not shifting suddenly, but drifting in a predictable rhythm that mirrors the calm pace of the rain outside, offering gentle reassurance that nothing here will change without warning. The sound of rain against the window remains soft and consistent, each drop arriving without urgency, joining a pattern that feels endless, as though it has been repeating for far longer than you have been here and will continue long after the room grows quiet again. Time feels increasingly distant now, no longer divided into moments that need to be measured or remembered, but stretched into a single, continuous presence that allows everything to exist without pressure. Breathing follows this same gentle pattern, slow and unforced, each breath arriving naturally, staying just long enough and then releasing without resistance, as though the body has recognized that it is safe to rest here. There's no need to look closely at any one map now, no need to follow a coastline or trace a river with your eyes, because the room does not ask for focus, only for quiet presence. The table remains where it is, the maps remain open, the candle continues to burn, and the rain keeps falling beyond the glass, all of it forming a steady arrangement that feels complete just as it is. And as you remain within this calm balance, it becomes easier to let thoughts slow and soften, allowing awareness to drift gently, supported by the quiet certainty that nothing will be required of you here, and nothing needs to be decided or resolved. You may begin to sense that the room itself no longer feels separate from you, as though the quiet presence of stone, paper, candlelight, and rain has gradually softened the boundary between observer and space, allowing everything to exist together in the same unhurried moment, without distinction or effort. The old maps remain open across the table, but their details no longer form clear images or destinations, instead becoming gentle patterns of lines and shapes that invite the eyes to move slowly, wandering without purpose, tracing curves and edges, not to understand them, but simply to remain with them for a while, until even that small act of looking begins to feel unnecessary. Ink fades gently into parchment, coastlines dissolve into suggestion, and rivers lose their direction, becoming quiet pathways that lead nowhere in particular, offering only the comfort of continuity rather than the promise of arrival. The candle continues to glow nearby, its flame steady and patient, casting a warm light that feels less like illumination and more like reassurance, a constant presence that allows the room to remain calm, unpredictable, without ever drawing attention to itself. Shadows drift slowly along the stone walls, moving so gradually that they seem almost still, their gentle motion offering no surprises, no sudden changes, only the quiet confirmation that time is still passing, even though it no longer feels important to notice. Outside the window, the rain maintains its soft, consistent rhythm, each drop arriving without urgency, joining an endless pattern that feels familiar and deeply comforting, as though it has been repeating for far longer than memory can reach and will continue long after awareness fades. The sound blends seamlessly with the silence of the room, creating a steady background that does not need to be followed or interpreted, something that can remain present whether it is noticed or not, supporting stillness rather than interrupting it. Breathing becomes slower now, deeper and more relaxed, each breath flowing naturally into the next without pause or effort, forming a gentle rhythm that mirrors the quiet patterns of the space around you, allowing the body to settle fully into rest. There is no need to remain aware of the breath, and no reason to guide it, because it moves on its own, responding instinctively to the calm that fills the room, finding a pace that feels deeply natural and easy to maintain. Time continues to soften, stretching gently until individual moments no longer stand apart, merging instead into a single, continuous presence where nothing feels urgent and nothing feels delayed, allowing everything to exist together without pressure. The table remains where it is, solid and unmoving. The maps remain open and undisturbed. The candle continues to burn, and the rain keeps falling beyond the glass, all of it forming a quiet arrangement that feels complete just as it is, without needing change or attention. As awareness drifts further, it becomes less important to remain focused on the room itself, because the sense of calm it offers no longer depends on objects or details, but exists on its own, steady and uninterrupted. Thoughts may begin to slow and soften, now arriving less frequently, staying only briefly, and then fading away without resistance, leaving behind a growing sense of quiet that feels safe and familiar. There's nothing here that requires decision, nothing that asks for understanding, and nothing that needs to be remembered, because this room was never meant to hold meaning, only stillness. And as everything continues quietly on its own, the rain, the candle, the maps, the steady passing of time, you're free to let awareness loosen further, to rest more deeply, and to remain here without effort, allowing the calm of the old map room to carry you gently onward. You may notice now that the old map room no longer feels like a place you are observing from the outside, but rather like a quiet atmosphere you are resting within, as though the stone walls, the broad wooden table, the softened maps, and the gentle candlelight have slowly drawn closer together, forming a single, uninterrupted space where nothing stands apart and nothing requires clear definition. The maps remain spread across the table, yet the details continue to dissolve gently, lines and markings blending into one another until they feel less like symbols of land and distance and more like calm patterns, repeating shapes and that allow the eyes to move slowly without settling anywhere, wandering without purpose, and eventually finding no need to wander at all. Ink fades into parchment, parchment blends into shadow, and shadow softens into the warm glow of candlelight, creating a gradual transition where edges lose their sharpness, and clarity becomes less important than comfort, allowing attention to loosen naturally without resistance or effort. The candle burns with the same steady patience it has shown all along, its flame unchanging and reliable, offering a soft reassurance that does not depend on brightness or movement, but simply on its continued presence, quietly marking the passage of time without insisting that it be noticed. Light from the flame moves gently across the surface of the table, resting briefly on the maps, then drifting away again, never lingering long enough to demand focus, never shifting quickly enough to disrupt the calm that fills the room. Shadows continue their slow movement along the stone walls, stretching and retreating so gradually that they seem almost still, their motion predictable and soothing, offering no surprises and no sudden changes, only the gentle confirmation that the night continues quietly outside. Beyond the window, the rain maintains its familiar rhythm, falling in soft, repeating patterns that feel endless and unbroken, each drop arriving without urgency, joining a steady flow that no longer signals weather or distance, but simply continuity. The sound blends effortlessly with the silence inside the room, forming a background that feels complete on its own, a calm foundation that supports stillness rather than interrupting it, and allows awareness to rest without needing to listen closely. Breathing becomes slower still, lengthening gently, each breath arriving easily, staying for a moment, and then leaving again without effort, forming a smooth, unbroken rhythm that mirrors the quiet patterns of the room. There is no need to follow the breath now, and no reason to guide it, because it moves naturally, responding instinctively to the calm environment. finding a pace that feels deeply familiar and safe. Time continues to stretch and soften, losing its edges and distinctions until it no longer feels like a sequence of moments, but rather like a wide, open presence in which everything exists together, without before or after, without urgency or delay. The table remains steady and unmoving. The maps remain open and undisturbed. The candle continues to glow, and the rain keeps falling beyond the glass. All of it forming a quiet arrangement that feels complete, unbalanced, without any need for change. As awareness drifts further, it becomes less important to remain aware of the room itself because the sense of calm it offers no longer depends on objects or details, but exists on its own, steady and uninterrupted. Thoughts may appear less frequently now, arriving softly, lingering briefly, and then fading away again without resistance, leaving behind longer stretches of quiet that feel comfortable and natural. There is nothing here that requires understanding, nothing that asks for decision, and nothing that needs to be remembered, because this space was never meant to hold meaning, only stillness. And as everything continues quietly on its own, the rain, the candle, the softened maps, the slow movement of shadows, you are free to let awareness loosen even further, to rest more deeply, and to remain within this calm without effort, allowing the old map room to hold the night gently around you. You may not notice the exact moment when the room begins to feel less like something you are inside of, or more like something you are gently resting within, because the change does not arrive suddenly and it does not announce itself, but instead unfolds slowly, quietly, in the same unhurried way. The rain continues beyond the window, and the candle continues to burn beside the table. The maps remain open, yet the act of seeing them no longer feels separate from the act of being here, as though the lines on the parchment, the softened edges of ink, and the steady glow of candlelight have blended into a single, continuous field of calm that no longer asks the eyes to move or the mind to interpret. At the same time, there may be a growing awareness of how the body itself has begun to respond to this stillness, not by changing position or adjusting in any noticeable way, but by releasing small, unnecessary efforts, letting muscles soften where they no longer need to hold, and allowing weight to settle more evenly without instruction. Breathing continues somewhere in the background, slower now, less distinct, not something that needs to be followed or guided, but something that simply continues on its own, rising and falling at a pace that matches the quiet consistency of the room. The candle's light drifts gently across the table and the walls, and as it does, it seems to slow the sense of time even further, not because time has stopped, but because it no longer feels important to measure or track, allowing moments to stretch and overlap without clear boundaries. Shadows move so gradually along the stone that their motion is almost impossible to pinpoint, and in the same way, awareness itself begins to drift without direction, no longer moving from thought to thought, but resting in longer, quieter spaces between them. Outside, the rain remains steady and unchanged, and inside, the sound no longer feels like something entering the room, but something already present, layered into the silence itself, forming a soft, continuous backdrop that supports stillness rather than interrupting it. The sense of the body, the room, and the passing night begin to align gently, not merging completely, but no longer feeling separate either, existing together in a calm balance that does not need attention to maintain. There is no need to remain alert to any one sensation now, because nothing here requires response, and nothing here is waiting for a decision to be made, allowing awareness to loosen its focus and rest more deeply. Thoughts, if they appear at all, arrive without urgency, remain briefly, and then fade away again without resistance, leaving behind a growing sense of quiet that feels familiar and safe. The maps, the table, the candle, the rain, and the slow rhythm of breathing continue together, not as separate elements, but as parts of a single, gentle experience that unfolds at its own pace. And as this quiet balance remains unchanged, it becomes easier to allow awareness to drift further, to rest more fully, and to remain here without effort, letting the calm of the old map room hold the night softly around you. The room remains quiet in the same steady way it has for some time now, holding its stillness without effort, as though nothing here feels the need to change, or to move forward, or to arrive anywhere other than exactly where it already is. The maps continue to rest across the table, their surfaces softened by age and candlelight, their lines and markings offering no urgency, no instruction, only the gentle presence of paths that exist without being followed, and places that remain where they are without needing to be reached. You may notice again how the candle's flame stays calm and reliable, never flickering suddenly, never drawing attention to itself, simply continuing to glow in the same quiet way, moment after moment, allowing the light to remain warm and predictable. That light drifts slowly across the table, across the maps, across the edges of the room, and then settles again, repeating this gentle movement without variation, without emphasis, and without end. Outside the window, the rain continues in its familiar pattern, falling softly, evenly, and without interruption, each drop joining the next in a sequence that feels endless and therefore comforting. The sound of the rain does not ask to be listened to, and it does not need to be ignored either, because it remains present whether it is noticed or not, forming a calm background that supports rest. Breathing continues at its own pace, slow and unforced, rising and falling without instruction, matching the steady rhythm of the room and the rain without needing to be adjusted. There is no need to check the breath, no need to follow it closely, because it knows exactly how to continue in this space. The maps remain open, the table remains steady, the candle continues to burn, and the rain keeps falling, all of it repeating in the same quiet arrangement, again and again, without change. Time feels less like a sequence now, and more like a wide, open stretch, where moments overlap gently, and no single point stands apart from the next. Thoughts may appear less often now, and when they do, they pass through softly, without weight, without attachment, leaving behind longer spaces of quiet. The room continues to hold everything in balance, not by doing anything new, but by remaining exactly as it is, offering consistency rather than variety, and repetition rather than change. And as this repetition continues, steady and unbroken, it becomes easier to rest within it, allowing awareness to soften further, and letting the old map room continue quietly on its own. You remain in the old map room, and the longer you remain, the less it feels like you are doing anything at all, because nothing here asks to be done, and nothing here suggests that you should be moving toward a conclusion, as though the entire room was designed for the opposite purpose, to slow the mind down until it no longer tries to finish anything, and to soften the sense of time until it no longer insists on being measured. The table at the center of the room stays exactly as it is, heavy and steady, carrying the open maps with a kind of quiet reliability, and the maps themselves rest in wide layers of parchment and paper, their edges curled and softened, their surfaces marked with lines that once held certainty, but now hold only suggestion, allowing you to look without focusing, to notice without identifying, and eventually to remain without even needing to look at all. The candle continues to burn beside the maps, its flame calm and patient, never flashing or changing suddenly, never demanding attention, and the light it offers does not feel like illumination meant for work, but like a gentle presence meant for rest, a warmth that exists near you without pressing in, allowing the room to remain soft and predictable, and allowing your awareness to loosen its grip. Outside the window, rain continues in the same steady pattern, falling with quiet consistency, each drop arriving and then letting go, joining a sound that has no beginning and no end, and it becomes easy to stop thinking of it as weather at all, and easier still to think of it as continuity, as the simplest form of rhythm, repeating without effort and without change. There is a particular comfort in sounds that do not ask to be interpreted, in rhythms that do not contain a message, in patterns that do not lead anywhere, because they allow the mind to rest without needing to solve, and they allow the body to settle without needing to prepare. And as the rain continues, and as the candle continues, and as the maps remain open and undisturbed, you may notice that the room begins to feel less like a place you entered and more like a quiet condition, as though you are resting inside stillness itself, inside the slow and gentle atmosphere where nothing arrives suddenly and nothing leaves with urgency. You might let your attention rest on one small corner of a map, not to read it, but simply to notice the way the candlelight touches the paper, revealing a faint texture, the subtle grain of parchment, the softened traces of ink, and then, without effort, your attention might drift somewhere else, to another corner, to another curve, to another line that fades into the page, and there is no need to decide where it goes, because drifting is the natural behavior of the mind when it is no longer being pushed. Perhaps you notice the way coastlines curve and taper, the way rivers branch and thin, the way mountains are suggested with delicate shading, and how none of it asks to be verified. None of it asks to be correct, because this is not a room of proof. It is a room of quiet, and quiet does not require precision. The candle's light remains steady, and the shadows along the stone walls move slowly, almost imperceptibly, stretching and retreating with the smallest changes in flame and air, and the movement is so gentle that it does not attract attention, yet it offers a subtle reassurance, the reassurance of soft change that never surprises. Breathing continues somewhere in the background. You do not need to check it, because the body knows how to breathe without instruction. And the body, when it is safe, naturally finds a slower pace, a deeper rhythm, a calmer pattern, and you may notice that you are already there, already breathing in a way that feels less like effort and more like quiet continuation. In this room, nothing tries to speed you up, and nothing tries to wake you up, because the room has no interest in performance. and no interest in urgency, and no interest in keeping you sharp. And the rain outside has no interest in startling you, and the candle has no interest in flickering dramatically, and the maps have no interest in demanding that you follow them. So everything aligns toward the simplest possible outcome, the outcome where you become less involved, less responsible, less required. Time becomes less distinct, not because time disappears, but because the feeling of time depends on change. And here, change is so gentle that it becomes almost impossible to locate. And the mind, no longer receiving sharp markers, stops trying to count, stops trying to predict, stops trying to calculate, and begins to soften into a wide, open awareness where moments overlap and merge. And you do not need to hold it, and you do not need to push it away, because the room does not ask for control, and it does not ask for effort, allowing thoughts to come and go in their own time, without consequence, without direction, and without importance. The candle continues to glow beside the maps, its light steady and calm, moving slowly across the paper and the stone, never lingering too long in one place, and never leaving anything in complete darkness, creating a balance that feels predictable and safe. Outside the window, the rain continues its quiet pattern, falling softly and evenly, forming a sound that blends so completely with the silence of the room that it becomes difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. Breathing continues naturally, slow and unforced, rising and falling in a way that no longer needs to be noticed because the body has already found a rhythm that feels comfortable here. The maps remain open and undisturbed, the lines and markings no longer suggesting distance or direction, but resting quietly as part of the room itself, offering no questions and expecting no answers. Time feels wide now, stretched and gentle, no longer divided into moments that need to be tracked or remembered, but existing as a single, continuous presence that allows everything to remain exactly as it is. There is nothing here that needs to change, nothing that needs to happen next, because the room has already settled into a calm that does not depend on progression or movement. As awareness softens further, it becomes easier to let attention drift without effort, to rest within the quiet repetition of rain, candlelight, and stillness, and to allow the room to continue holding the night on its own. And as everything remains steady and unchanged, you're free to rest more deeply, to loosen awareness even further, and to remain here without intention, allowing the calm of the old map room to carry the moment gently onward. The old map room remains exactly as it has been, unchanged and unhurried. And the longer everything stays this way, the less important it feels to notice any individual detail, because the calm of the space no longer depends on objects or light or sound, but exists quietly on its own, steady and uninterrupted. The maps still rest across the table, yet they no longer appear as maps at all. The lines and markings softened into gentle patterns that no longer suggest land or distance, only the reassurance of repetition, the comfort of shapes that do not lead anywhere, and therefore ask nothing in return. Candlelight continues to glow nearby, but even the warmth of that light feels distant now, less like illumination and more like a quiet presence that allows the room to remain gentle, allowing shadows to soften rather than move, allowing stillness to deepen. without effort. Outside the window, the rain continues its familiar rhythm, steady and unchanging, and it no longer feels like something happening beyond the room, but something already woven into the quiet itself, forming a continuous background that does not interrupt thought, but slowly dissolves it. Breathing remains slow and natural, so subtle now that it barely registers, rising and falling without awareness, without direction, without any need to be followed, as though the body has fully settled into the same calm that fills the room. There is no longer a clear sense of how long you have been here, or how long the night has been passing, because time has lost its edges, stretching gently until moments blend together, overlapping softly without beginning or end. Awareness itself begins to loosen, no longer moving deliberately from one sensation to the next, but resting in wider spaces of quiet, where thoughts appear less often and remain for shorter moments before fading away again. If a thought does arrive, it does so lightly, without weight or urgency, and it can remain briefly before dissolving on its own, without needing attention, without needing to be understood, leaving behind a deeper sense of stillness. The room continues to hold everything in balance, not by changing or adding anything new, but by remaining exactly the same, offering predictability rather than variety, and calm repetition rather than movement. Maps remain open, the table remains steady, candlelight remains soft, and rain continues to fall, all of it repeating quietly, again and again, without variation, without emphasis, and without any expectation that it be noticed. There is nothing left to follow now, and nothing left to focus on, because the calm no longer comes from the scene itself, but from the absence of demand, the absence of direction, and the absence of effort. As attention softens further, it becomes easier to let awareness drift without resistance, to rest within the quiet continuity of sound and stillness, and to allow the room to continue on its own. The old map room no longer needs to be imagined clearly, because its presence has already done its work, creating a space where nothing needs to happen next, and nothing needs to be remembered. And as everything remains steady and unchanged, you are free to rest more deeply, to loosen awareness further, and to allow the calm of the night to carry everything gently forward, without effort and without interruption. The quiet of the old map room feels complete now, settled in a way that no longer changes or shifts, as though the space has reached a final balance where nothing needs to be adjusted and nothing needs to be added or removed. The maps remain open, but their presence has faded into the background, no longer forming images or ideas, existing only as soft shapes beneath candlelight that no longer calls for attention. The candle continues to burn, yet its flame feels distant now, almost symbolic rather than visible. Its warmth no longer something to notice, but something that quietly remains. Rain continues beyond the window, steady and familiar, its sound blending so fully into the silence that it feels less like something you hear, and more like something that simply exists. Breathing is slow and easy, moving without awareness, rising and falling naturally, as though it has synchronized completely with the calm of the room. Time has softened further, losing its sense of sequence, allowing moments to overlap gently until there is no longer a clear distinction between one and the next. Awareness drifts in wider spaces now, no longer focused on details or thoughts, resting instead in quiet stretches where nothing arrives and nothing leaves. If a thought does appear, it does so finally, without urgency, remaining only briefly before dissolving again, leaving no trace behind. The room remains steady and unchanged, holding its stillness effortlessly, offering no direction and no demand. There is nothing left to observe and nothing left to follow, because the calm no longer comes from the room itself, but from the absence of effort. As stillness deepens, it becomes easier to let awareness loosen even further, allowing rest to take over naturally, without intention or control. Everything continues quietly on its own. The old map room no longer feels like a place that needs to be held in mind, because its quiet presence has already settled fully, leaving behind a calm that no longer depends on images, objects, or thoughts. The maps, the table, the candle, and the stone walls remain somewhere in the background, but their shapes no longer matter. Their details no longer form ideas, and their presence no longer asks to be noticed. Rain continues outside, steady and familiar, its sound blending gently into everything else until it becomes impossible to separate it from the silence, as though the night itself is breathing slowly and evenly. Breathing continues on its own, unobserved and unforced, rising and falling in a way that feels completely natural, requiring no guidance, no awareness, and no attention. Time no longer feels like something that moves forward, but like something that rests, wide and open, allowing moments to soften and dissolve into one another without effort. There is nothing left to listen for now, and nothing left to follow, because the calm no longer comes from sound or story, but from the absence of demand. Awareness drifts gently, without direction, without intention, resting in longer and quieter spaces where nothing needs to happen and nothing needs to be remembered. Any thought appears, it does so faintly, without weight, and fades again almost immediately, leaving behind only the sense of rest continuing quietly on its own. The night remains undisturbed, the rain remains steady, and everything else continues without needing attention or effort. There is no need to stay with the room now. It can continue on its own. You are free to rest. Everything else will remain quietly as it is. The quiet remains steady and unchanged, resting comfortably in the background as everything continues exactly as it is, without effort and without variation. The rain continues outside, falling softly and evenly, repeating the same gentle pattern again and again, each sound blending into the next until it becomes a single, continuous presence that does not need to be followed. Breathing continues slowly, naturally, without awareness, rising and falling in the same calm rhythm, requiring no attention and no guidance. Nothing shifts in the room, and nothing needs to, because the calm no longer depends on objects, on light, or on sound, but exists quietly on its own. The sense of time remains distant now, softened and stretched, allowing moments to overlap gently without separation or urgency. Awareness rests lightly, without focus, without direction, drifting in quiet spaces where nothing arrives and nothing leaves. The rain remains steady, the night remains undisturbed, and everything else continues quietly in the background. There is nothing to listen for now, nothing to wait for, because everything that needs to continue is already continuing. Stillness deepens gently, without effort, without intention, allowing rest to settle fully and naturally. Everything remains calm. Everything remains quiet. Everything continues on its own.